Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, last week I had a chance to lay out some of my top priorities for the new Congress as Republicans take the helm. Today I want to elaborate on the first of those priorities, which is to confirm President Trump's cabinet. Back in November the 5th, it seems like a long time ago, but it was just the other day, Americans went to the polls to elect new leaders, including a president of the United States. Voters made their voices heard as to which direction our country should go because they plainly believed that we were heading in the wrong direction. And as a result of that vote, President Trump won the election decisively. Now, from my perspective, that means he is entitled to his team, absent some extraordinary circumstances, because it's his team or cabinet that will help him follow through on the promises that he made on the campaign trail. Once confirmed, these men and women will then be accountable to him and the American people to accomplish the goals that he has set out for them. That's the way the process is supposed to work. Now, Madam President, if you remember back in 2017, during President Trump's first term, this process was not what you might call smooth sailing. In fact, Senate Democrats did everything they could to delay and derail the president's cabinet. They did so openly, without shame or any embarrassment. In fact, when Senate Minority Leader at the time was asked in an interview back in 2017 if he would attempt to keep Justice Scalia's seat open rather than work with Republicans to confirm a Republican president's nominee, he said, absolutely. Well, it's funny how history works and how things work out, but of course, Democrats went on to criticize Republicans for doing exactly the same thing that Senator Schumer said he would do if the shoe were on the other foot. It was an embarrassing moment, or should have been an embarrassing moment for the Democratic Minority Leader. He sent a clear message to all of us that he was willing to put partisanship ahead of the country and before the voices of the American people who voted for President Trump could be heard. If Democrats repeat the same play this year, they will only further embarrass themselves and the party and be a disservice to the American people who elected President Trump and J.D. Vance on November the 5th. So I would like to caution my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, not to play the same shenanigans again. But unfortunately, it looks like they've come up with a new tactic. The delays we're already starting to see in the confirmation process are completely unacceptable. We know when President Trump will be sworn in, that's January the 20th, and we need to make sure that as many members of his cabinet, particularly his national security cabinet, are available to be confirmed when President Trump takes his hand off the Bible. Just 2 days ago, Axios News reported some interesting details, for example, surrounding the Democrats' handling of the nomination of Tulsi Gabbard, President Trump's choice to be Director of National Intelligence. According to this report, Democrats on the Senate Intelligence Committee are refusing to work as a team with Republicans to schedule her hearing, citing concerns that her background checks are not yet completed. Now, this is unacceptable. According to Axios, Ms. Gabbard has submitted all of the paperwork required on her end as part of the background check process. And this is someone who serves currently as a lieutenant colonel in the National Guard. It's a former member of Congress, somebody who's been thoroughly vetted for security purposes. But it is up to the Biden administration, because they currently hold office, including all parts of the executive branch, including the Department of Justice and the FBI. It's up to them to make sure the paperwork is expedited so Ms. Gabbard can have her hearing and presumably, if confirmed, be available to serve on day one after President Trump is sworn into office. So the FBI needs to work 24/7, not we'll get around to it when we can. They need to work 24/7 to get these background checks done before the nomination hearings, and so the hearings can actually be set. We know that if there's the will to get it done, that it can be done. And in my view, it must be done. If Democrats are so concerned that the Senate does not yet have her background check, then the President Biden, should direct those concerns, should address those concerns by making sure that his FBI and his Department of Justice get the background checks done, because they are still technically in charge until January the 20th. There's nothing the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, can do officially to make that happen. It's up to President Biden and his FBI and his Department of Justice. By slow-walking her background check and causing delays for such a critical appointment, the Biden administration is posing a threat, an unnecessary threat to our national security. We all know we're living in a dangerous world, and now is not the time to have some prolonged and unnecessary vacancy for the Director of National Intelligence. So I would hope our Democratic colleagues and the administration, the current administration, would abandon this futile and dangerous tactic. As other nominees are working to complete their requisite paperwork, I would urge the Biden administration to work with the incoming administration, not against the administration, to expedite this process. They talk about a peaceful transfer of power. Well, that's what this includes. This is part of that peaceful transfer of power from one administration to the next. Democrats have a duty and a responsibility to set aside any partisan tactics and to give the president an opportunity to have his cabinet confirmed. Just imagine how Democrats and even the mainstream media would respond if an outgoing Republican administration intentionally caused delays for crucial appointments after voters gave them a mandate. They would claim this is a threat to our nation's security. Republicans would be accused of playing games and playing politics with critical government agencies. And of course, their favorite pet accusation, Democrats would undoubtedly call these tactics a threat to democracy. Well, with the shoe on the other foot, the situation is no different. Back in 2015, the senator from Michigan, Senator Stabenow, said, quote, "When a president wins an election, they have a right to their team." That's exactly how we should understand this process. President Trump was elected, and he has a right to his team. Again, this doesn't mean that the Senate will rubber stamp any nominee. That's what advice and consent is all about. The background checks, the hearings, like we see this morning with the Secretary of Defense nominee, Mr. Hegseth. This means committees must hold hearings and votes for each of the president's nominees. It's that simple. And of course, Democrats have every opportunity during these hearings to ask any questions that they want and to vote however they want. We're not saying their rights should somehow be constricted, but to deny and delay the hearings outright is simply unconscionable and dangerous. Democrats are not entitled to sabotage this president by denying him his cabinet. Any efforts to do so undermines the democratic process and that peaceful transfer of power that we hear so much about and which is so important. Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and the outgoing Biden administration alike must act in the best interest of the country, not in their party's best interest, not in pursuit of some partisan agenda, but in the best interest of the country. And it is far from America's best interest to have President Trump sitting alone at the White House maybe with the vice president and no cabinet there to support him in his efforts. President Biden should remember that people around the country and around the world will be watching very closely his final days in office. Unfortunately, his administration has already been marked by a multitude of failed policies and scandals. President Biden would be wise to note that the handling of the transition at the end of his term can, if mishandled, further tarnish his administration's reputation. History will not be forgiving if his outgoing administration decides to threaten the safety and security of the American people by causing unnecessary delays for cabinet appointments, particularly his national security cabinet. The American people elected President Trump as the next leader of our country. Now it's the time for the Senate to do our job by making sure that the president has the team he needs to do that job. And I intend to do everything I can to see that his nominees are confirmed on a timely basis. Madam President, I yield the floor.